Anna had always been someone who noticed the small things in life. She walked home from work that evening, her coat pulled tight against the cold wind and her scarf wrapped around her neck like a shield against the snow that had begun to fall in. Thick, silent flakes. The streets were nearly empty, and the few people who moved hurried along their paths with their heads down and shoulders hunched. She felt the cold biting through her gloves and the tips of her fingers stinging, but her mind was elsewhere, thinking about the dinner she would make when she got home and the warm bath she would take before sleep. She turned a corner and saw an old woman struggling to carry a basket of groceries. The woman was hunched over, and her movements were slow and unsteady each step, leaving footprints that quickly filled with fresh snow. Anna stopped in her tracks, her heart immediately tightening at the sight. The old woman looked exhausted. Her coat was thin, and her hat barely covered her ears. The basket was heavy and swinging dangerously from her hands. The snow had already begun to cling to her hair and shoulders. Anna hesitated for only a moment before rushing forward, her own gloves brushing against the icy handles of the basket. She said, "Can I help you, Mom?" In a voice that she hoped was gentle. The old woman looked up, her face lined with years of hard work and worry, and for a moment her eyes held disbelief. Then a small, grateful smile spread slowly across her lips. "Oh, thank you, dear," she said. "I did not think anyone would stop in this weather." Anna shifted the basket carefully and balanced it against her hip, and together they walked slowly through the streets, each step a small battle against the snow and the cold. Anna chatted quietly about the neighborhood and the weather, and the old woman spoke too in a soft voice about her late husband and the grandchildren who had all moved away, leaving her alone with only errands and loneliness for company. The snow fell heavier, and the wind began to bite deeper. Anna shivered, but she refused to let go of the basket. She could feel the woman trembling, and she matched each step with careful attention. And when they reached the old woman's door, she fumbled with keys. With shaking fingers, Anna steadied her and offered a smile. "You are safe now," she said. The old woman looked at her eyes glistening with tears and murmured, "God bless you, young lady. You have no idea what this means." Anna waved off the words, feeling a strange warmth inside her heart. She helped carry the groceries inside, placing them on the counter, and the old woman insisted on offering a cup of tea. Despite Anna's protests, they sat together for a moment, the fire crackling in the small living room, the tea steaming in delicate porcelain cups, and Anna listened to stories of a life full of struggles and small victories, a life that seemed so distant from her own, but yet filled with the same human longing for kindness and connection. Old woman held Anna's hands tightly as she stood to see her to the door. "You have made this snowstorm easier than I could have imagined," she said. Anna smiled and waved goodbye, stepping back into the night, the wind whipping against her coat. Snow now ankle-deep, and her boots wet and cold, but her heart lighter than it had been in days. The next morning, Anna woke to a gray sky and the streets still coated in a thick blanket of snow. She sipped her coffee by the window, watching children trudge to school and neighbors shovel their sidewalks. The night had been restless, filled with dreams of the old woman and the warmth of the tiny living room where they had shared tea. She shook her head, smiling at herself for feeling so affected by a small act of kindness, and yet she knew in her heart it had mattered more than she could express. Slipping into her coat, she decided to go to work a small boutique downtown, where she had been employed for several years. She liked the routine, the familiarity of folding clothes, arranging displays, greeting customers, and helping them find exactly what they needed. The streets were slippery and the snow still clung to her boots, leaving wet prints as she entered the store. The bell above. The door jingled and she shook off the chill, placing her scarf carefully around her neck. The first few customers were like ghosts, moving in slow patterns, and Anna greeted each with a smile, asking about their days and offering help when needed. She arranged a stack of sweaters by color and felt the simple satisfaction of order and accomplishment. Then the door opened again, and a man stepped in. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark coat, his shoes polished and glistening, despite the snow. The briefcase he carried seemed to weigh little against his confident stride. He looked around the store with sharp eyes, and Anna felt a strange sense of anticipation. She greeted him. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you with anything today?" And he paused, studying her with a faint smile. "Yes," he said, "I am looking for a gift for someone very special. Someone who has shown me kindness in a world that sometimes seems indifferent." Anna nodded, unsure how much to reveal. He mentioned her name, casually, as if testing the sound, and then looked around again as if trying to decide something. Finally, he approached the counter and placed the briefcase down. He opened it, revealing an assortment of envelopes and papers, and looked directly at Anna. "I heard a story about you last night," he said calmly, his voice smooth and precise. "A story about how you helped an old woman in the snow. I was told that sometimes small acts of humanity can change lives, and I wanted to meet the person who did such a thing." Anna blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She tried to compose herself and replied, "I did not do anything extraordinary. It was just the right thing to do." He shook his head. "No," he said, "it is extraordinary because most people would have walked by unnoticed." He continued, "I have been moved by what I heard, and I wanted to offer you something in return. But it is not just money or a gift. It is an opportunity, something that could change your life forever." Anna felt her pulse quicken, and her thoughts scattered. She thought of her modest apartment, her steady but unremarkable routine, the dreams she had long set aside because life seemed too practical, too demanding. He saw the hesitation and smiled reassuringly. Life sometimes rewards those who act without expectation. He said. Anna took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing and pulling at her all at once. She realized that what she had done without thought or hope was now rippling into a future she had never imagined, and she knew that the cold snow, the long walk, and the trembling hands of the old woman had led her here to this strange, surreal encounter with a millionaire who valued something far more precious than money, kindness, and courage. And in that instant, Anna felt a sense of possibility stretching before her, as wide and deep as the sky outside the frosted windows. Anna stood behind the counter, frozen for a moment, feeling the surreal weight of the encounter pressing gently against her chest. The millionaire smiled patiently and waited, as if he understood that life sometimes takes time to absorb moments of unexpected change. He placed a hand on the briefcase and said, "You have a choice." Anna felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the realization that everything she had known about her life could pivot in a single breath. She took a deep breath and tried to gather her thoughts. She thought of the old woman and the snowstorm, the way her hands had trembled as they carried the heavy basket, the warmth of the tea and the fire, and the simple gratitude in eyes that had seen decades of struggle. She remembered feeling useful and connected, and a little human in a world that often seemed rushed and uncaring. Now the millionaire was offering her a chance to expand that feeling to something bigger, something she could never have imagined. She could travel. She could learn. She could build a future in ways she had never dared to dream. Anna thought of the boutique, the familiar customers who smiled at her as they entered the store, the folded sweaters, the small but satisfying order of her daily life, and a small pang of fear crossed her heart. The known was comforting the unknown, thrilling and terrifying. All at once she swallowed and finally said, "I do not know if I can take this step. If I can accept something so large." He nodded, as if he had expected her hesitation, and said, "Sometimes courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward." Despite it, he explained that the opportunity was flexible and would allow her to help communities in need fund programs for the elderly and support initiatives that made lives better in ways she had already demonstrated she cared about. But she could also choose to remain in her life here in this town, with her routines and comforts, and it would still be a choice of value and meaning. Anna felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She thought of the old woman and the stories she had shared, the loneliness, the hardships, and the small joys that life had offered her. In spite of everything, Anna realized that this was more than money, more than fame, more than any reward she had imagined. It was the chance to create ripples, like the ones she had started the day before in the snowstorm, to extend a kindness that could change lives, not for recognition, but for humanity itself. She made her choice. She reached out and shook the man's hand firmly. "I will do it," she said with a voice that trembled slightly, but carried a newfound resolve. The millionaire smiled and nodded as he closed the briefcase and handed her a folder with details and plans. Anna left the boutique later that day, walking through the snow once again. But this time she felt different, lighter, as if the cold no longer bit so sharply, because her heart was filled with something new, a purpose.